I'm going to be a father, he shouted to his stunned friends. Did you hear that? I am going to be a father. Nia was so shocked she couldn't even react. He sat her down gently, his hands on her shoulders, his face beaming. Is it true, Nia? Are we really having a baby? She could only nod, her mind reeling. This was not the reaction she had prepared for. There was no anger, no denial, no fear. There was only joy. Isaac turned to Uncle Tobias and Mrs. Elena, his happiness overflowing. This is the best news of my life, he said. Don't worry about anything. I will take care of her. I will take care of both of them. I will marry her. Mrs. Elena and Uncle Tobias were just as surprised as Nia. They had come prepared for a fight for another round of denial and shame. Instead, they were met with this young man's enthusiastic acceptance. You are sure about this, my boy? Uncle Tobias asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. A child is a great responsibility. I know, Isaac said, his expression suddenly serious. I know I don't have much right now, but this changes everything. This gives me a reason to work hard. A reason to make all my dreams come true. I will not let Nia or my child down. I promise you. He turned back to Nia and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Stop crying, my angel, he said softly. This is a happy day. For the first time in weeks, Nia felt a genuine smile touch her lips. It was small and shaky, but it was real. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made her knees buckle washed over her. She had been so sure she was alone, so certain that her life was ruined. But here was Isaac, ready to stand by her side, not out of duty, but out of what seemed to be genuine happiness. His joy was infectious. It was a warm light that chased away the cold shadows of Joseph's rejection and her mother's anger. Maybe, just maybe, things would be all right. We should go and tell your mother, Isaac said, his voice full of a newfound determination. Nia's smile faded. She won't listen. She threw me out. Then we will make her listen, Isaac said with confidence. She is your mother. She loves you. When she sees that I am serious, that I am ready to be a husband and a father, she will come around. Nia wasn't so sure. She knew her mother's stubborn pride. But looking at Isaac's hopeful face, she allowed herself to feel a small spark of hope as well. He was not a solid rock like she had thought Joseph was. He was a whirlwind, yes, but perhaps he was a whirlwind that could sweep away all the obstacles in their path. As they walked back toward Mrs. Elena's house, Isaac held her hand tightly. His friends, who had been watching from a distance, started cheering and clapping. Isaac just grinned and waved at them. He walked with a new spring in his step, his head held high. He was no longer just a carefree dreamer. He was a man with a purpose, a man who was about to become a father. Nia looked at him, and her heart felt a strange mixture of gratitude and confusion. This was not the future she had ever imagined for herself. But for the first time since she saw those two pink lines, it felt like a future she could survive. It was a messy, complicated, and uncertain future, but at least she would not have to face it alone. Isaac's confidence was a powerful force. He was so certain that he could win over Mother Cecilia, that Nia began to believe it, too. He insisted that they go to her mother's house immediately, not with apologies, but with the pride of a man ready to claim his family. He gathered two of his closest friends, Luke and Jace, to go with him as witnesses, as was the custom. We will do this properly, he told Nia. I will show your mother that I am a man of honor. Nia, Mrs. Elena, and Uncle Tobias watched as Isaac and his friends, dressed in their best clothes, walked down the road to Mother Cecilia's house. Nia's heart was a nervous drum. She prayed that Isaac's optimism was not misplaced, that her mother's heart might have softened just a little. They waited in Mrs. Elena's parlor, the minutes stretching into an eternity. Nia couldn't sit still. She paced back and forth, twisting a piece of her wrapper in her hands. It wasn't long before they heard shouting. It was Mother Cecilia's voice, sharp and angry, cutting through the evening air. Nia's heart sank. A few moments later, Isaac and his friends returned. Their faces were grim, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Isaac's confident smile was gone, replaced by a look of anger and hurt. What happened? Uncle Tobias asked, though he already knew the answer. She is not a human being, Isaac said, his voice shaking with fury. She is a stone. She called us names. She said I was a jobless good-for-nothing. She said her daughter would never marry a man like me. Luke, one of Isaac's friends, added. She insulted us and threw us out. She said we were bringing shame to her doorstep. Nia felt a fresh wave of despair. She had known it was a long shot, but a small part of her had hoped. Now that hope was gone. Her mother was a fortress of pride, and no amount of good intentions could break through her walls. I told you, Nia whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. She will never accept it. Isaac clenched his fists, his jaw tight. This is not the end, he said, his voice low. She can't stop me from being a father to my child. If she will not give her blessing, then we will do without it. But Nia knew it wasn't that simple. In their community, a mother's blessing was everything. To be married without it was to start a life under a dark cloud of disapproval. Mrs. Elena tried to console them. Patience, my children. Her anger is still fresh. Give her time. Her heart will soften. But Isaac was too angry to be patient. Time. How much time? While Nia is carrying my child and living in another person's house. No, this is not right. He began to pace the small room, his mind clearly working. His anger was slowly being replaced by a cold determination. This is all his fault, he said suddenly. Whose fault? Uncle Tobias asked. Joseph's. Isaac spat the name out like a bitter seed. If that coward had not run away, we would not be in this mess. He is the one who should be facing your mother's anger, not me. Nia's heart twisted. She hated that Joseph's name was still part of this. A ghost that continued to haunt them. He ran away like a thief in the night. Isaac continued, his voice rising again. He left Nia to suffer alone. He is the one who brought this shame. And I am the one paying the price. He stopped pacing and looked at Nia, his eyes full of a fierce protectiveness. I will not let him get away with it. I am going to find him. What are you going to do? Nia asked, a new fear gripping her. I am going to make him understand what it means to be a man, Isaac said, his voice hard. He cannot just destroy a person's life and walk away without consequences. Before anyone could stop him, he turned and stormed out of the house, his friends trailing behind him. Nia, Mrs. Elena, and Uncle Tobias were left in a stunned silence. The situation was spiraling out of control. What had started as a personal crisis was now turning into a public conflict. This will only make things worse, Uncle Tobias said, shaking his head sadly. Fighting will not solve anything. Nia felt a sense of dread. She imagined Isaac and Joseph, the storm and the rock, crashing into each other. She didn't know what would happen, but she knew it would not be good. Her mother's pride had created a wall they couldn't break through. And now Isaac's anger was about to start a fire they might not be able to put out. The simple, hopeful path she had seen just a few hours ago was now blocked by new and dangerous obstacles. Her future, and the future of her unborn child, was more uncertain than ever. Isaac's anger carried him through the darkening streets. He walked with a purpose. His friends Luke and Jay struggling to keep up. He didn't know exactly what he would do when he found Joseph, but he knew he couldn't let the injustice stand. He felt a burning need to defend Nia's honor and his own. They reached Joseph's small blue shop, but it was dark and locked. The wooden shutter was pulled down, and a padlock secured it. He's gone, Luke said, stating the obvious. He said he was leaving. He can't have gone far, Isaac insisted, his eyes scanning the street as if expecting Joseph to appear from the shadows. Someone must know where he went. They started asking around, their questions drawing curious looks from the people who were closing up their stalls for the night. Most people just shrugged, but finally a woman who sold roasted snacks by the roadside gave them a lead. I saw him earlier, she said, fanning the coals of her fire. He was carrying a bag. He went toward the central depot. The central depot was a chaotic hub of activity even at this hour. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and the shouts of local guides calling out their destinations. Old battered buses were parked in haphazard rows, their engines rumbling. Isaac, Luke, and Jay split up, searching through the crowd. Isaac's eyes darted everywhere, looking for Joseph's familiar face. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was where he would make things right. He found Joseph near a bus that was heading to the south. He was just about to hand his bag to the attendant. Joseph, Isaac's voice was a sharp crack in the noisy air. Joseph turned and his face went pale when he saw Isaac. He looked like a cornered animal. Isaac strode toward him, his fists clenched. "So you were really going to run away?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. Joseph straightened up, trying to look defiant. "It's none of your business." "None of my business?" Isaac laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You leave a girl pregnant and alone, and you say it's none of my business. She is carrying a child that could be yours, and you are running away like a coward." A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the confrontation. "I told her the child is not mine," Joseph said, his voice shaking slightly. "I have nothing to do with her." "You are a liar," Isaac shouted, his anger exploding. He shoved Joseph hard. "You are a liar and a coward. A real man doesn't run from his responsibilities." Joseph stumbled back but caught his balance. His own fear was now turning to anger. "And what are you, a hero? You think you are better than me because you have nothing to lose. You have no job, no future. What can you offer her?" "I can offer her my love and my support," Isaac shot back. "I can offer to stand by her side, which is more than you can do. I will be a father to that child whether it is mine or not, because that is what a real man does." The words hung in the air, a stark contrast between the two men. Isaac, the supposed good-for-nothing, was talking about honor and responsibility. Joseph, the hard-working planner, was talking about how a baby would ruin his plans. The crowd murmured, their sympathies clearly shifting toward Isaac. They saw a young man willing to step up and another trying to run away. Joseph felt the weight of their judgment. His face burned with shame. He had always prided himself on being respectable, on being better than the aimless boys like Isaac. But now, in the eyes of his community, he was the villain. "This is not over," Joseph muttered, his eyes full of resentment. He snatched his bag from the attendant, pushed his way through the crowd, and disappeared into the darkness. Not toward the bus, but back in the direction of the town. Isaac stood there, his chest heaving, the anger slowly draining away, leaving him feeling empty. The confrontation had solved nothing. Joseph was still in denial, and Nia was still caught in the middle. As Isaac and his friends walked back, the mood was somber. The small victory of shaming Joseph felt hollow. It didn't change the fact that Mother Cecilia had rejected him. It didn't change the fact that Nia was pregnant and facing an uncertain future. The incident at the depot quickly became the talk of the neighborhood. The story spread like wildfire, with details being added and twisted along the way. Some people praised Isaac for his courage. Others whispered that he was a fool for claiming a child that might not be his. The gossip reached Mother Cecilia, hardening her heart even further. Now not only was her daughter pregnant out of wedlock, but her name was being dragged through the mud in a public spectacle. For Nia, the news of the fight brought only more pain. She was now the center of a storm of gossip and conflict. The two men who should have been her support were now her shame. She felt trapped, not just by her circumstances, but by the actions of the people around her. In the end, Joseph did leave town just as he had promised. He packed his things in the middle of the night and left without a word to anyone. His little blue shop remained closed, a silent monument to his cowardice. His departure seemed to settle the matter. In the eyes of the community, Isaac was now officially the father of Nia's child. But for Nia, Joseph's absence didn't bring closure. It only left a gaping hole of unanswered questions and a deep lingering hurt. The rock had crumbled and disappeared, leaving her to face the future with only the unpredictable storm. The weeks turned into months. The initial storm of gossip and scandal slowly subsided into a quiet, simmering judgment that followed Nia wherever she went. She rarely left Mrs. Elena's house, preferring the quiet solitude of the small room to the curious stares and hushed whispers of the neighbors. Her pregnancy began to show a gentle rounding curve that was both a source of secret joy and public shame. Life with Mrs. Elena was peaceful. The kind woman treated Nia like her own daughter, making sure she ate well and got plenty of rest. She never spoke of the difficult circumstances, offering instead a steady stream of gentle encouragement and practical advice. "A child is a blessing from God, no matter how they come into the world," she would say, her hands busy shelling seeds. "You must be strong for the little one." Isaac was a constant presence in her new small life. True to his word, he did not abandon her. He visited every day, his cheerful presence, a welcome burst of sunshine in her quiet world. He still didn't have a steady job, but he always managed to find work. Loading goods at the market, helping a mason, driving a commercial bike for a day. And with the little money he made, he would buy things for Nia. Sometimes it was a small bag of fruit. Other times a piece of roasted food or a colorful new cloth. He would sit with her in Mrs. Elena's parlor, telling her about his day, making her laugh with his funny stories. He would place a gentle hand on her growing belly, a look of awe on his face. "He's kicking," he would say, his eyes wide with wonder. "Our son is going to be an athlete. I can feel it." Nia would smile, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. In those moments she could almost forget the shame and the uncertainty. Isaac's unwavering support was a balm to her wounded heart. He treated her not as a problem or a disgrace, but as the mother of his child, a woman to be cherished. She began to see past his carefree exterior and appreciate the deep well of kindness within him. The feelings of gratitude she had for him slowly began to blossom into something deeper, something that felt a lot like love. Her own mother, however, remained a distant, angry figure. Nia would sometimes see her at the market, and Mother Cecilia would turn her head and walk away, her face a mask of stone. The rejection still hurt, a dull ache that never completely went away. Nia missed her mother. She missed their small, cramped house. She even missed her mother's constant nagging. Uncle Tobias visited often, bringing news and small gifts from the extended family. He continued to try to reason with his sister, but her pride was a mountain he could not move. "She asks about you," he told Nia one day. "She pretends not to care, but I know she is worried. She just doesn't know how to let go of her anger." So Nia's life settled into a new rhythm, a rhythm of waiting. She waited for the baby to be born. She waited for her mother's heart to soften. She waited for a future that was still hazy and undefined. Isaac, meanwhile, was filled with a new sense of purpose. He started talking less about his dreams of being a musician, and more about finding a steady job. "I need to provide for my family," he would say, his voice serious. "I need to build a home for you and our son." He started saving the little money he made, putting it aside in a small wooden box he kept hidden. He started looking for more permanent work, asking everyone he knew for opportunities. The old, reckless Isaac was slowly being replaced by a more mature, responsible man. The prospect of fatherhood was changing him in ways Nia had never expected. One evening, as they sat outside watching the stars, Isaac gave her a small wrapped package. "This is for you," he said. Nia opened it. Inside was a beautiful soft baby blanket decorated with little yellow patterns. "It's not much," he said, looking a little shy. "But I wanted our son to have something new." Tears welled up in Nia's eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She held the soft blanket to her cheek. It was the first thing they had for the baby, a small tangible piece of their future together. "Thank you, Isaac," she whispered. "It's beautiful." He took her hand. "I love you, Nia," he said, his voice earnest. "And I love our baby. I will never leave you. I promise." In that moment, Nia believed him. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the baby blanket clutched in her hand. The road ahead was still long and difficult. They had no home of their own, no family blessing, and very little money. But they had each other. And for now that felt like enough. The long, lonely wait was filled with small moments of hope, and Nia held on to them tightly, like precious jewels in the palm of her hand. While Nia's world had shrunk to the size of Mrs. Elena's small house and the dusty street outside, another world just a few miles away in a wealthy part of Riverport was spinning on a completely different axis. This was the world of Serena, a young woman whose life was as bright and polished as the expensive jewelry she wore. Serena lived in a large, beautiful house in a gated estate where the roads were paved and the generators were so quiet you could barely hear them. Her days were filled with shopping trips, lunches with friends, and planning her upcoming wedding to her handsome and successful fiancé, Kale. On this particular afternoon, Serena was sitting in her lavishly decorated living room with her two best friends, Faye and Cleo. The room was cool thanks to the air conditioner humming softly in the corner. They were sipping on chilled fruit juice and flipping through a thick, glossy wedding magazine. "This dress is divine," Faye said, pointing to a picture of a model in a stunning white gown covered in lace and pearls. "You would look like a queen in this, Serena." Serena just smiled. Kale said, I can have any dress I want. He wants our wedding to be the event of the year. Of course he does, Cleo said, a hint of envy in her voice. He adores you. You are so lucky, Serena. Kale is handsome, rich, and completely devoted to you. Serena's life was by all accounts perfect. She was beautiful. She came from a good family, and she was engaged to one of the most eligible bachelors in the city. Her future was as secure and well-planned as a royal procession. So have you two set a date yet? Faye asked, taking a sip of her juice. Not yet, Serena replied, a small frown creasing her perfect brow. Kale has been so busy with his new business deal. He travels a lot these days. He says as soon as the deal is closed we can set the date. Well, don't wait too long, Cleo advised. A man like Kale has a lot of admirers. You need to lock him down. Serena laughed. A light tinkling sound. Oh, I'm not worried about that. Kale only has eyes for me. As they continued to chat about wedding venues and guest lists, Serena's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her smile widened. It's him, she said, her voice full of affection. She answered the call. Hello, my love. Her friends watched as her expression slowly changed. The happy, confident smile was replaced by a look of confusion, then concern. What do you mean you can't talk now? She said into the phone, her voice losing its cheerful tone. Where are you? What hospital? Is everything all right? She listened for a few more moments, her face growing pale. Okay, she said finally, her voice tight. Okay, I understand. Call me when you can. She ended the call and stared at her phone, a deep frown on her face. What's wrong? Faye asked, her own face now etched with worry. I don't know, Serena said, shaking her head as if to clear it. That was strange. He said he was at a hospital, that there was an emergency. He sounded upset. An emergency? What kind of emergency? Cleo pressed. He didn't say, Serena replied, her voice distant. He just said he had to go and would call me back later. A heavy silence fell over the room. The cheerful, carefree atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a sense of unease. For the first time, a small crack had appeared in the perfect facade of Serena's life. Her fiancé was at a hospital for an unknown reason. His voice strained and distant. Faye and Cleo tried to reassure her. I'm sure it's nothing, Faye said. Maybe a friend had an accident. Yes, don't worry, Cleo added. He will call you back and explain everything. Serena tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She put the wedding magazine aside. Suddenly, the pictures of beautiful dresses and grand reception halls seemed trivial and unimportant. A small seed of doubt had been planted in her mind. Who was this person that needed Kale so urgently at a hospital? And why did he sound so secretive? The world outside her perfectly manicured estate, a world of struggle and unexpected crisis, had just sent a small ripple into her calm, orderly life. And as she sat there surrounded by luxury, but filled with a sudden cold sense of anxiety, Serena couldn't shake the feeling that her perfect future was not as secure as she had always believed. Unbeknownst to her, her life and Nia's, two lives lived in completely different worlds, were about to collide in a way neither of them could ever have imagined. The baby decided to come early. It was in the middle of a hot, sticky night a few weeks before Nia's due date. She was woken by a sharp, cramping pain in her lower back. At first, she thought it was just a bad dream. But then another wave of pain hit, stronger this time, making her gasp. She knew immediately what was happening. The baby was coming. A wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over her. It was too soon. She wasn't ready. Isaac wasn't here. He had gone to a neighboring town for a 2-day construction job and wasn't due back until the next evening. She stumbled out of her room, her hand pressed against her belly, and knocked on Mrs. Elena's door. Mrs. Elena, she called, her voice tight with pain. I think it's time. Mrs. Elena was awake in an instant. She came out, her face full of concern. She took one look at Nia, who was now leaning against the wall, her face pale and beaded with sweat, and her practical nature took over. All right, my child. Don't panic, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. Breathe. Just breathe. I will get help. The neighborhood was dark and quiet. The only sound was the distant barking of a dog. There were no cars, no commercial bikes on the road at this hour. The local clinic was a 15-minute walk away, a journey that now seemed impossible for Nia. Mrs. Elena quickly woke up her oldest son, a strong young man named Marco. Together they helped Nia, supporting her on either side as she slowly, painfully made her way down the dusty road. Every few steps a contraction would seize her, and she would have to stop, groaning and clinging to them for support. The walk was an eternity of pain and fear. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the darkness seemed to press in on them. Nia felt a sense of complete helplessness. All she could do was focus on Mrs. Elena's calm voice, telling her to breathe, and Marco's strong arm holding her steady. They finally reached the clinic, a small modest building with a single light burning over the entrance. The nurse on duty quickly assessed the situation and helped Nia onto a bed in the small labor room. Mrs. Elena stayed by her side, holding her hand and wiping her brow with a cool, damp cloth. "You are doing well, my child," she murmured. "You are strong." As the hours passed, the pain intensified. Nia lost all track of time. Her world shrank to the small, stuffy room, the rhythm of her own breathing, and the crushing waves of pain. Meanwhile, news of Nia's labor spread through the neighborhood. A neighbor who had seen them leaving for the clinic had gone to tell Mother Cecilia. Cecilia was sitting alone in her dark house when the news came. The neighbor delivered the message through the closed door and then hurried away, not wanting to face her anger. For a long time Cecilia just sat there, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Her pride was at war with her love for her daughter. The anger she had held onto for so many months was still there, but it was now mixed with a new and powerful emotion, fear. Her only child was in labor, and she wasn't there. She thought of Nia, alone and in pain, and a sharp pang of guilt shot through her. She remembered the day Nia was born, the overwhelming love she had felt when she held her tiny baby for the first time. How had they come to this? How had her love become so buried under layers of anger and disappointment? She stood up and began to pace the room. Her mind was in turmoil. Part of her wanted to run to the clinic to be by her daughter's side. But another part, the proud, stubborn part, held her back. What would she say? How could she face the daughter she had cast out? Back at the clinic, things were not going well. Nia was weak and losing a lot of blood. The doctor, a tired but competent man who had been called from his home, came out to speak to Mrs. Elena. "She's in a difficult situation," he said, his face grave. "The baby is not positioned correctly and she is losing too much blood. We need to do a transfusion, but we have a problem." "What is it, doctor?" Mrs. Elena asked, her heart pounding. "She has a rare blood type," the doctor explained. "We don't have any of it here in our stock. We need to find a donor and we need to find one quickly." The doctor's words were a death sentence in the middle of the night in their small community. Where would they find someone with a rare blood type? Mrs. Elena felt a wave of despair so strong it almost brought her to her knees. Nia's life was hanging by a thread and they were running out of time. Panic gripped Mrs. Elena's heart. A rare blood type in the middle of the night felt like an impossible task. The doctor had given them a small piece of paper with the blood type written on it. "Oh, negative. We must try," she said to Marco, her voice shaking but determined. "We will wake up the neighbors. We will ask everyone." Marco nodded, his young face pale with worry. They rushed out of the clinic and began knocking on doors, their urgent calls for help, shattering the stillness of the night. The task was daunting. Most people didn't even know their own blood type. They were met with confused faces, sleepy apologies, and a lot of head shaking. Hope was fading with every door that closed on them. As they were about to give up, a thought struck Mrs. Elena. It was a long shot, a desperate idea born from the depths of her fear. "Joseph," she said to Marco, "go to his shop. I heard he came back to town a few days ago. Maybe, just maybe." Marco didn't question her. He ran off into the darkness. Mrs. Elena sent up a silent, fervent prayer. Marco found Joseph's shop. The shutter was down, but he could see a dim light filtering from underneath. He pounded on the shutter, his fists making a loud, frantic rhythm. "Joseph, Joseph, open up. It's an emergency." After a few moments, the shutter rattled and was pushed up. Joseph stood there looking startled and annoyed. He had indeed returned to town, having used his savings to start a small business supplying goods to other kiosks. He had come back quietly, hoping to avoid any more drama. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. It's Nia, Marco said, breathless. She's at the clinic. She's having the baby, but there are problems. She's losing blood. The doctor says she needs O-negative blood, and they don't have any. We've asked everyone. Joseph's face changed. The annoyance was replaced by a look of shock, then a deep gut-wrenching fear. All the guilt he had been trying to run from came rushing back. O-negative, he whispered. It was his blood type. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his shirt and followed Marco, running through the dark streets toward the clinic. His mind was a chaotic storm of regret and terror. What if he was too late? What if his cowardice had cost Nia her life? When they arrived at the clinic, the doctor rushed Joseph into a small room to test his blood. It was a match. The relief that washed over Joseph was so intense it made him dizzy. The transfusion began immediately as Joseph lay on a cot, his blood flowing through a tube and into Nia's arm. He could see her through the open doorway of the labor room. She was pale and weak, her eyes closed. He had never seen her look so fragile. The sight of her so close to death was a physical blow. All his selfish plans, his fears about money and responsibility seemed so small and meaningless now. All that mattered was her. The doctor, busy and focused, came to check on him. You are a lucky man, he said, patting Joseph on the shoulder. Your wife and child are going to be fine thanks to you. It's a good thing you have the same blood type. It's common for a father and child to share such things. The doctor's casual words struck Joseph with the force of a physical blow. The father. He was the father. There was no more running, no more denying. The truth was here, flowing from his veins into hers, saving the life of the woman he had abandoned and the child he had denied. After the transfusion was complete, and Nia's condition had stabilized, Joseph walked unsteadily out of the clinic. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky with soft streaks of pink and gold. The world was waking up to a new day, and Joseph felt like he was waking up from a long, terrible nightmare. He saw Isaac arriving, his face etched with worry. He had just returned to town and had heard the news. He saw Mother Cecilia standing by the clinic entrance, her face a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The anger had finally drained from her, leaving only the raw terror of a mother who had almost lost her child. They all looked at Joseph, their expressions a mixture of confusion and question. Why was he here? How had he known? Joseph looked at their faces, the man who had taken his place, the woman who hated him, the mother who had cast him out. He knew he couldn't hide anymore. The truth was not just a secret to be kept. It was a debt to be paid. He took a deep, shuddering breath, ready to face the consequences of his actions. The time for lies was over. The morning sun cast long shadows across the clinic yard as the three people who defined Nia's life stood in a tense, silent triangle. Isaac, his face tight with a mixture of worry and suspicion, looked at Joseph. Mother Cecilia, her usual armor of anger stripped away, just stared, her mind struggling to make sense of his presence. Joseph felt the weight of their gazes. His heart was pounding, but his mind was strangely calm. The fear that had driven him away was gone, burned away by the terror of almost losing Nia. He knew what he had to do. The doctor he needed. O-negative blood, Joseph began, his voice. I have O-negative blood. Isaac's eyes narrowed. How did you know to come here? Mrs. Elena's son came to find me, Joseph explained, his eyes not leaving Isaac's. He was looking for a donor. A heavy silence followed. The unspoken question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Why him? It was Mother Cecilia who finally broke the silence. Why would he come to you? She asked, her voice a weak, trembling version of its usual sharp tone. Joseph finally looked at her, and for the first time he did not flinch from her gaze. He looked her straight in the eye and the words came out simple and devastating. Because the baby is mine. The confession landed with the force of a physical blow. Isaac took a step back, a look of profound shock and hurt on his face. Mother Cecilia just stared, her mouth agape, her mind refusing to process what she had just heard. I am the father, Joseph repeated, his voice stronger now, filled with a painful certainty. I was a coward. I was scared. I was a fool. He turned to Nia, who had been brought out onto the veranda to get some fresh air. She was weak but awake, and she had heard everything. Her eyes, wide and full of a new kind of pain, were fixed on him. "Nia, I am so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. He knelt beside her chair. "I was so scared of not having enough, of not being enough for you and a child. I thought running away was the only answer. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Seeing you like that, I realized that none of it matters without you. Please, can you ever forgive me?" Tears streamed down his face, tears of genuine remorse. Isaac watched them, his own heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. The joy he had felt, the purpose he had found in being a father, it had all been based on a lie. The child he had loved as his own for months was not his. The future he had been building was not his to build. He felt a surge of white-hot anger, a desire to hit Joseph, to make him pay for the pain he had caused. But then he looked at Nia, at her pale, exhausted face, and his anger melted away, replaced by a deep, aching love. Her well-being was all that mattered. He walked over to them and placed a hand on Joseph's shoulder. "Get up," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Joseph looked up at him, his eyes full of shame. "She needs a father," Isaac said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not a coward who runs away, but a man who stays. Be that man for her. Be the father this child deserves." It was the hardest thing Isaac had ever had to say. He was giving up his dream, his family, for the sake of the child he still thought of as his own. It was an act of incredible grace and maturity. Joseph stood up, his face filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame. He looked at Isaac, the man he had once despised, and saw not a rival, but a better man than himself. Mother Cecilia finally found her voice. "So all this time," she began, her voice trembling. "All this shame, it was you." "Yes," Joseph said, facing her. "It was my fault. All of it. I will not ask for your forgiveness because I do not deserve it. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. I love your daughter, and I will provide for her and for my child. I promise you." The doctor came out then, a smile on his face. "Good news," he announced. "You have a healthy baby girl." A baby girl? The news cut through the thick tension. A new life had come into the world, innocent of all the drama and pain that surrounded her arrival. Nia began to cry again, but this time the tears were different. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, and of a deep, confusing mix of love and hurt. She looked at Joseph, the man who had broken her heart, but had also saved her life. She looked at Isaac, the man who had stood by her when no one else would, and who was now making the ultimate sacrifice. And she looked at her mother, whose hard face was finally beginning to crumble with the weight of her own emotions. Her life was a tangled mess of lies, love, and betrayal. But in the middle of it all was a tiny baby girl, her daughter. And as she thought of her, Nia knew that she had to find a way to move forward, to untangle the knots, and to build a future, however complicated it might be. The truth was finally out, painful and destructive, but it was also the only foundation on which they could begin to rebuild. The days that followed were quiet and filled with a fragile tension. Nia recovered at Mrs. Elena's house, her tiny daughter, whom she named Alara, cradled in her arms. The baby was small but perfect, with a tuft of black hair and Joseph's serious eyes. Holding her, Nia felt a fierce, protective love that overshadowed all the pain and confusion. Joseph was a changed man. The fear and selfishness that had defined him were gone, replaced by a quiet, determined sense of responsibility. He visited every day, not with the easy charm of Isaac, but with a humble, almost shy demeanor. He didn't bring grand gifts, but he brought practical things, packets of supplies, tins of nutrients, and food for Nia and Mrs. Elena. He would sit for hours just watching the baby sleep, a look of awe and wonder on his face. He and Nia talked, not about the past but about the future. He told her about the small but growing business he had started. He had used his savings to buy a delivery bike, and was now supplying goods to small shops in the surrounding areas. He was working hard from dawn until dusk, driven by a new purpose. Isaac, true to his word, stepped back. It was painful for him. He had loved Nia and had eagerly awaited the arrival of the child he thought was his. He visited once, bringing a small toy for the baby. The visit was awkward and full of unspoken sadness. He looked at Alara, the child who was not his, and Nia could see the heartbreak in his eyes. "She is beautiful," he said, his voice thick. "You will be a good mother, Nia." He didn't stay long. As he left, he told Nia, "If you ever need anything, I am still your friend." Nia knew it was the end of their chapter together, and her heart ached for the kindness he had shown her when she had needed it most. Mother Cecilia was a storm of conflicting emotions. Her anger at Joseph was immense, but it was tempered by the undeniable fact that he had saved her daughter's life. She was also overwhelmed by the arrival of her granddaughter. She would come to Mrs. Elena's house pretending to be visiting her neighbor, but her eyes would always be on the small bundle in Nia's arms. One afternoon, Joseph came to Mrs. Elena's house, but this time he was not alone. He was accompanied by his elderly father and an uncle who had traveled from their village. They were dressed in their best traditional attire and carried gifts of crops and local wine. They sat in Mrs. Elena's small parlor, a formal delegation. Joseph's father, a man with a kind, weathered face, spoke humbly and eloquently. He apologized for his son's shameful behavior. He spoke of their family's honor and their desire to make things right. Then Joseph, his voice clear and steady, formally asked Mother Cecilia for Nia's hand in marriage. "I know I have caused you great pain," he said, his eyes fixed on her. "I cannot erase the past, but I can promise to build a good future. I love Nia, and I will honor and protect her and our daughter for the rest of my life." Mother Cecilia looked at her own brother, Uncle Tobias, who gave her a slight nod. She looked at Mrs. Elena, who smiled encouragingly. She looked at Nia, who was holding her baby, her expression hopeful. And finally, she looked at Joseph at the genuine remorse and determination in his eyes. Her heart, which had been a hard, cold stone for so long, finally began to melt. She saw not just the boy who had shamed her daughter, but a man who was trying his best to be honorable. She saw a future for her granddaughter, a future with a father who was ready to claim her. She took a long deep breath and finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "The shame has been great," she said, her voice still raspy with old anger. "But the child is innocent. For her sake, and for the sake of my daughter's happiness, I will not stand in the way." A wave of relief washed over the room. The wedding was not a large, lavish affair. It was a simple traditional ceremony held in Mother Cecilia's small yard, which had been swept clean and decorated with palm fronds. The families came together, and under the warm sun, Joseph and Nia were married. A few weeks later they held a small naming ceremony for the baby. It was an intimate gathering of family and close friends. Mother Cecilia, her face now free of the hard lines of anger, proudly held her granddaughter. Isaac was there too. He had been invited by Nia, and he came, his smile a little sad but genuine. He was introduced to everyone as the baby's godfather, a special and honored friend of the family. He held baby Alara for a moment, a look of bittersweet affection on his face. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the small gathering, Nia looked around at her new unconventional family. There was Joseph, her husband, a man who had made a terrible mistake, but was trying his best to atone for it. There was her mother, who was finally learning to let go of her pride and embrace love. There was Isaac, a man whose kindness had been a lifeline in her darkest hour. And in her arms was Alara, a symbol of all the pain and all the joy, the mistake and the miracle. Her life was not the one she had dreamed of. The path had been rocky and filled with heartbreak. But as she looked at her daughter's sleeping face, she felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed, and in its wake, something new and beautiful had begun to grow. It was a life built not on perfect plans, but on forgiveness, second chances, and the enduring power of love. And for the first time in a very long time, Nia felt truly deeply,